And let's take a look at what newspapers in Washington, D.C. publish about the historic U.S. presidential polls. DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh reports from Ground Zero.
We are in Washington, D.C. At a little distance, this magnificent tower that you see is the Washington Monument. It's over 500-foot tall marble obelisk. It was built in the memory of the first president of the United States, George Washington. Let's now talk about who's going to be the next president of the United States. I'm turning to the Washington Post to scan through the newspapers. First, on the front page, there are these images of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris winding up their campaign just ahead of the elections. The article next to it is important, talks about the security concerns in these elections and in the aftermath of the results. Says officials try to safeguard vote count, panic buttons, drones, snipers among plans to protect the elections. Throughout the country, local officials are taking elaborate measures to fortify election-related sites, including plans for snipers on rooftop, protect the key vote-counting headquarters. Panic buttons have also been provided for election workers, and surveillance drones are also buzzing overhead. Let's turn to the next article in the same paper. The headline reads, Harris fights political headwinds on immigration in close race with Donald Trump. It is talking about the manner in which illegal immigration is really a central issue in these elections, and the stand of the leaders is going to determine what kind of support they're likely to get. There is a certain degree of nervousness among the Democrats as far as Kamala Harris's stand and work in this area is concerned, especially in swing states. A survey had talked about how the voters were sort of unsure about what she's achieved as a vice president over the issue and what she could achieve as a president. So the next paper we're looking at is the New York Times. On the front page, the headlines really captures the sense of these elections. It says, tightest contest in decades grows tighter at finish. The two parts to the article. The first one talks about a stressed electorate eagerly votes early. The early voting trends that we've seen, says an anxious America weary from the vitriolic campaign season and worried about the state of the nation's democracy, with roughly 75 million people have cast ballots in early voting period. Another part of this article talks about the shift in the swing states. Swing states are in focus, are likely to determine who's going to be the next president. The latest poll by New York Times and Siena College finds that Vice President Kamala Harris is showing new strength in the swing states of North Carolina and Georgia. Meanwhile, former U.S. President Donald Trump has erased her lead in Pennsylvania and is maintaining a certain advantage as far as the state of Arizona is concerned. So an important insight into what's going on just at the time of the contest between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The next article that we are picking up from the New York Times looks at how the U.S. presidential election could have a bearing on international affairs. It's looking at the Ukraine conflict from this lens. The headline reads, Harris and Trump offer Ukraine sharply contrasting visions of future. There is an anxiety that has gripped Kiev as U.S. is about to pick a new commander-in-chief. It gives some details of the Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian military is losing ground in eastern Ukraine at the fastest pace in years. An influx of several thousand North Korean soldiers to Russia has added unpredictable new dimension to the conflict. It also talks about that against this challenging conflict background, Ukraine is bracing for the U.S. elections on Tuesday that will allow, almost most certainly shape the course of the future. It depends who comes into power, whether it's going to be Kamala Harris or whether it will be Donald Trump. So what happens next to Ukraine will depend greatly on who wins the presidential elections here in the United States. Those were some of the highlights from the newspapers today. With camera person Jashankar, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in Washington, D.C.